The observation deck of Terra Station fell silent as the targeting computer locked onto the ancient Viridian fortress floating in the darkness of space. Admiral Keith Warren stood with his arms crossed, his gray eyes fixed on the distant structure that had withstood 1,000 years of warfare. Beside him, Dr. Lillian Foster clutched her data tablet, her knuckles white with nervous tension. "All systems ready, Admiral," the weapons officer reported from his console. Keith nodded once. "Fire." The railgun did not roar. It did not flash with brilliant light or shake the station with recoil. Instead, there was only a subtle hum of electromagnetic coils charging and releasing in perfect sequence. The tungsten projectile, no larger than a human forearm, accelerated down the 3-kilometer barrel in less than a second. By the time it left the weapon, it was traveling at 3% the speed of light. The fortress simply ceased to exist. One moment it hung in space, its ancient armor plating scarred by centuries of failed attacks. The next moment, a silent explosion of debris marked where it had been. The kinetic energy released by the impact vaporized everything within 100 meters of the impact point and sent shockwaves rippling through the entire structure. Secondary explosions bloomed like flowers as power systems overloaded and ammunition stores detonated. Lillian stared at her tablet, watching the energy readings spike and fall. Impact confirmed. The projectile achieved 97% of calculated velocity. Penetration was complete. The fortress shields registered the mass for 0.03 seconds before structural failure. "In other words," Keith said quietly, "their shields did nothing." Around the observation deck, the assembled representatives from the Galactic Council stood in stunned silence. The Viridian diplomat, a tall creature with purple-tinged skin and 4 arms, stared at the debris field with something approaching horror in its large eyes. The Korth observer, its crystalline body refracting the starlight into rainbow patterns, made a sound like grinding glass that its translator interpreted as disbelief. Even the Zafani representative, normally composed and serene, had gone completely still. For 12,000 years, the galaxy had operated under certain fundamental rules. Energy weapons were supreme. Plasma could melt through armor. Lasers could slice through hulls with precision. Particle beams could disassemble matter at the atomic level. And energy shields could deflect all of these threats given sufficient power. Humanity had broken those rules with technology the galaxy considered ancient history. Keith turned to face the assembled observers. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored guests, what you have just witnessed is the primary armament of the Terran Defense Initiative. We call it a railgun. The principle is simple. We use magnetic fields to accelerate a solid projectile to extreme velocity. No explosives. No energy beams. Just mass and speed." The Viridian diplomat found its voice first. "This is impossible. Our fortress was protected by Mark 7 energy barriers. Nothing should have penetrated." "Your shields deflect energy," Lillian said, stepping forward with her tablet. She projected holographic data into the center of the room. "They work by creating fields that redirect plasma, absorb laser energy, and scatter particle streams. But our projectile is not energy. It is solid matter. At relativistic speeds, mass does not care about energy shields. It simply punches through." The Korth observer made that grinding sound again. "The kinetic energy involved must be enormous." "Precisely," Lillian continued. She manipulated the hologram to show calculations and graphs. At 3% light speed, even a small projectile carries the kinetic energy equivalent to a strategic nuclear weapon. The tungsten rod we fired weighed 40 kilograms. The energy released on impact was approximately 500 megatons. The room erupted in shocked murmurs and translated exclamations. The 3 great empires had built their military dominance on energy weapon technology for millennia. Their ships carried shields designed to deflect and absorb energy attacks. Their armor was engineered to withstand heat and radiation. But kinetic impacts at relativistic speeds? That was something their ancestors had abandoned as primitive thousands of years ago. Keith raised his hand for silence. "The Galactic Council asked humanity to demonstrate our military capabilities. We have done so. The implications should be clear to everyone in this room." The Zafani representative, a being that resembled a floating collection of luminous tendrils, pulsed with agitated colors. "You are saying that every ship in our fleets is vulnerable to this weapon?" "Not vulnerable," Keith corrected. "Defenseless. Your shields will not stop our projectiles. Your armor is designed to dissipate heat, not absorb kinetic impact. A railgun round traveling at 3% light speed will pass through a dreadnought like it is made of paper." The Viridian diplomat's 4 arms gestured frantically. This must be brought before the full council immediately. The military balance of the entire galaxy has been disrupted. That was rather the point, Keith said dryly. Within hours, the emergency session of the Galactic Council convened. The Grand Chamber on the neutral world of Sanctuary Prime held representatives from 47 member species. At the center, on a raised platform, the three great empires maintained their seats of power. The Viridian Dominion, masters of plasma warfare. The Korth Collective, perfectars of laser technology. The Zephani Union, wielders of particle destruction. And now, standing before them all, the humans with their primitive kinetic weapons that made millennia of advanced technology suddenly obsolete. Ambassador Claire Dixon led the human delegation. She was a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and the kind of calm confidence that came from years of diplomatic negotiations. She stood at the speaker's podium while holographic displays showed the footage of the fortress destruction on repeat. Honored council members, Claire began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. Humanity did not develop railgun technology to threaten the peace. We developed it because we approach problems differently. While the galaxy pursued ever more powerful energy weapons, we asked a simpler question. What happens when you throw something really, really hard? The Viridian military commander, General Thrace, rose from his seat. His voice boomed through the chamber. Your demonstration proves nothing except that you destroyed an abandoned fortress. In actual combat, against moving targets with active defenses, your primitive weapons would be useless. Keith stepped forward to join Claire. General, your dreadnoughts move at sublight speeds. Our targeting computers track objects moving far faster. Your active defenses are energy-based countermeasures designed to intercept missiles and deflect beams. They cannot stop a solid projectile moving at relativistic velocity because there is insufficient time to react. By the time your sensors detect the round, it has already hit you. Researcher Venn of the Korth Collective activated its own holographic display. The crystalline being's mathematical models filled the air above the chamber floor. I have reviewed the human calculations. They are correct. At 3% light speed, a projectile crosses the effective range of dreadnought weapons in approximately 12 seconds. Sensor detection occurs at 8 seconds. Defensive systems require a minimum of 10 seconds to calculate intercept solutions and execute. The mathematics are irrefutable. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. 47 species processed the same terrible realization. Everything they knew about warfare had changed in a single demonstration. The great empires with their magnificent fleets and powerful energy weapons were suddenly as vulnerable as primitives with wooden shields. And humanity, the newest member of the council, had done this with technology the galaxy had abandoned as outdated thousands of years ago. The Galactic Council chamber hummed with tension as Admiral Keith Warren stepped up to the central holographic projector. Behind him, the debris field of the destroyed Viridian fortress still glowed on the massive display screens. Representatives from 47 species watched with a mixture of fear and fascination as he prepared to explain exactly why their entire military doctrine had become worthless overnight. Let me start with a basic question, Keith said, his voice calm and measured. What is an energy shield designed to do? General Thrace of the Viridian military scoffed from his elevated seat. Everyone knows this, human. Energy shields redirect plasma, absorb laser radiation, and scatter particle beams. This is elementary military science. Correct, Keith agreed. Energy shields work by creating fields that interact with energy. They redirect it, absorb it, or diffuse it. But what happens when something is not energy? What happens when it is simply mass? He activated the holographic display. A simple animation appeared showing a spherical energy shield surrounding a ship. Then a small dot representing a projectile approached the shield. This is what your shields expect, Keith continued. The dot touched the shield and scattered into multiple smaller dots, representing deflection. When energy hits your shields, the interaction is predictable. Photons can be redirected. Plasma can be dispersed. Particles can be scattered. But watch what happens with solid mass. The animation reset. This time, the approaching dot was labeled as a tungsten projectile. When it reached the shield, it passed straight through without slowing down. The shield flickered briefly, then the projectile struck the ship, and the entire hologram exploded. Your shields do not stop mass, Keith said simply. They barely interact with it at all. The shield detects the projectile, registers its presence, but has no mechanism to deflect or stop solid matter traveling at extreme velocity. Dr. Lillian Foster stood and joined Keith at the projector. She pulled up a new set of calculations that filled the air with numbers and equations. Let me explain the physics, she said, adjusting her glasses. Kinetic energy increases with the square of velocity. This means that when you double the speed of an object, you quadruple its impact energy. At relativistic speeds, even tiny masses carry devastating energy. She highlighted a specific equation. Our tungsten projectile weighed 40 kilograms. At 3% the speed of light, which is approximately 9,000 kilometers per second, the kinetic energy equals roughly 500 megatons. For comparison, the largest nuclear weapon ever built by humans was only 50 megatons. A murmur rippled through the council chamber. The Zafani representative pulsed with alarmed colors. You are saying a single 40-kilogram projectile carries 10 times the destructive power of your most powerful bomb? Yes, Lillian confirmed. And we can fire one every 30 seconds. The energy requirements are substantial, but our fusion reactors provide more than sufficient power. The real limitation is barrel cooling and projectile manufacturing. Researcher Venn of the Korth Collective rose from its crystalline seat. The being's body refracted light into rainbow patterns as it moved to its own holographic station. I must verify these claims independently, Venn announced, its translated voice carrying a note of scientific rigor. The Korth scientist began running calculations, its manipulator appendages moving across holographic controls with practiced precision. Mathematical models bloomed in the air, showing trajectory calculations, energy transfer equations, and impact simulations. The chamber waited in tense silence as Venn worked, checking and rechecking the human data. Finally, after several minutes that felt like hours, Venn turned to address the council. The human calculations are accurate. I have modeled the impact against standard Viridian Fortress armor and shields. The results are conclusive. At 3% light speed, a 40-kilogram tungsten projectile will penetrate any known defensive system currently in service across the galaxy. General Thrace slammed one of his 4 fists against his chair's armrest. This is unacceptable. There must be countermeasures. Thicker armor. Stronger shields. Kinetic barriers. Keith shook his head. General, you are not understanding the scale of the problem. Let me put this in terms anyone can grasp. Imagine trying to stop a bullet with a piece of cloth. That cloth might stop a knife thrust. It might even slow down a slow-moving projectile. But against a high-velocity bullet, it is useless. Now imagine the bullet is traveling 100 times faster, carrying 1,000 times more energy. What kind of cloth would stop that? There is no cloth, Venn stated flatly. The analogy is imperfect but functionally accurate. Current armor plating is designed to dissipate heat from energy weapons. Against kinetic impact at relativistic speeds, the armor simply vaporizes at the point of impact. The shockwave then propagates through the ship's structure faster than internal bulkheads can compensate. Lillian brought up another simulation. This time it showed a cross-section of a typical dreadnought. The railgun projectile entered from the bow, and the animation tracked its path through the ship. It passed through shield generators, armor plating, interior bulkheads, crew compartments, engineering sections, and out the stern, all in less than a second. Behind it, secondary explosions rippled outward as the kinetic energy transfer destroyed everything along the impact corridor. The projectile does not need to be explosive, Lillian explained. The kinetic energy alone is sufficient. When the tungsten rod impacts your armor at 9,000 kilometers per second, the collision generates temperatures exceeding the surface of a star. The armor does not just break. It vaporizes instantly. The shockwave then travels through your ship's structure, destroying systems and rupturing containment fields. Ambassador Claire Dixon stood from the human delegation seats. The council asked us to demonstrate our capabilities. We have done so. But let me be clear about what this means for galactic security. Every dreadnought currently in service is vulnerable. Every space station. Every orbital fortress. Centuries of military investment and infrastructure development are now obsolete. The chamber erupted in overlapping voices as representatives began arguing among themselves. The translator system struggled to keep up with the cacophony of languages and emotional tones. Fear, anger, disbelief, and calculation all mixed together in a storm of political chaos. The Viridian diplomat, who had remained silent since the demonstration, finally spoke. Its voice cut through the noise with practiced authority. If what you say is true, then humanity now possesses the ability to destroy any military force in the galaxy. You could conquer the council within months. Keith met the diplomat's gaze steadily. We could. But we will not. Humanity did not develop this technology to become conquerors. We developed it because kinetic weapons are effective, efficient, and reliable. We are engineers at heart. We solve problems with simple solutions. Simple, General Thrace repeated, his voice heavy with bitter irony. You call weapons that render 12,000 years of military evolution obsolete simple? Yes, Keith said without hesitation. Because they are. We took an ancient principle, throwing rocks at our enemies, and applied modern physics and engineering. The galaxy became so focused on sophisticated energy weapon systems that you forgot the fundamental lesson of warfare. Sometimes the simplest approach is the most devastating. Researcher Ven's crystalline body dimmed slightly, a sign of deep thought among the Korth. The implications extend beyond military applications. If kinetic weapons at relativistic speeds are this effective, then defensive doctrine must be completely reconsidered. Ships will need to be faster and more maneuverable. Static defenses will become death traps. The entire strategic landscape has shifted. Exactly, Lillian confirmed. This is not just about one weapon system. This changes everything about how space warfare is conducted. Energy shields are no longer sufficient. Armor thickness no longer matters beyond a certain point. The only effective defense against railguns is not being where the projectile is aimed. Claire stepped forward once more. Which brings us to the real question facing this council. What happens now? Humanity has demonstrated a capability that threatens the existing power structure. The three great empires built their dominance on energy weapon superiority. That advantage no longer exists. The chamber fell silent again. Every representative understood the weight of that statement. The balance of power that had maintained galactic peace for millennia had been shattered by a species that had joined the council only 15 years ago. The emergency council session had barely adjourned when the first formal request arrived. Ambassador Claire Dixon stood in the human delegation's secure conference room aboard Sanctuary Prime Station, reading the message on her tablet with a carefully neutral expression. Admiral Keith Warren and Dr. Lillian Foster waited beside her, both understanding the significance of what was happening. The Viridian Dominion requests immediate technology sharing protocols, Claire read aloud. They offer full access to their plasma refinement techniques and military alliance in exchange for railgun specifications. Keith snorted. That was fast. The demonstration was less than 6 hours ago. Before Claire could respond, 2 more messages arrived in rapid succession. She glanced at them and shook her head slowly. The Korth Collective offers their laser-focusing technology and preferential trade agreements. The Zafani Union proposes a mutual defense pact and shared research facilities. All 3 empires want the railgun, Lillian observed, sitting down heavily in a chair. And they all sent their requests at almost the same time. Claire set down her tablet and looked at her colleagues. They are terrified. For 12,000 years, military power in this galaxy has been predictable. The strongest energy weapons and the best shields determined who held authority. We just proved that their entire military framework is worthless against kinetic weapons. They need railgun technology not just to gain advantage, but to avoid becoming irrelevant. So what do we tell them? Keith asked. Nothing yet, Claire replied. Let them wait. Let them worry. The longer we delay, the more desperate they become. And desperate empires make mistakes. Over the next 3 days, the requests became demands. The Viridian military commander, General Thrace, called for another emergency council session. This time, when the representatives assembled in the Grand Chamber, the atmosphere was charged with barely controlled panic. General Thrace stood at the Viridian platform, his 4 arms gesturing emphatically. The human demonstration was impressive, yes. But let us not overreact. One destroyed fortress does not prove battlefield effectiveness. The railgun is a large, slow weapon suitable only for attacking stationary targets. Against a moving fleet with active countermeasures, it would be far less effective. Keith rose from the human delegation seats without waiting for formal recognition. General, would you like us to demonstrate against a moving target? The chamber went silent. Thrace's purple-tinged skin darkened slightly, a sign of agitation among his species. That will not be necessary. I think it is, Keith continued, walking toward the center of the chamber. Because you are attempting to convince this council that railguns are not the threat we have proven them to be. You are doing this because the Viridian Dominion has the largest fleet in the galaxy, and you have just realized that every one of your dreadnoughts is now a liability rather than an asset. How dare you, Thrace began, but Keith cut him off. We can demonstrate against one of your active patrol ships right now. Pick any vessel within a light year of this station. We will fire a railgun round from Terra Station. Your ship will have full sensor warning and complete freedom to maneuver. Let us see if active countermeasures make any difference. Thrace's forearms dropped to his sides. He said nothing, but his silence spoke volumes. Everyone in the chamber understood what it meant. The Viridian military commander would not risk the humiliation of watching one of his ships destroyed in real time. Researcher Venn of the Korth Collective activated its holographic station. General Thrace's reluctance confirms what my calculations already proved. At relativistic speeds, reaction time is irrelevant. I have modeled every possible evasive maneuver a dreadnought can execute. In every scenario, the railgun projectile crosses the distance faster than the ship can respond. The only effective defense is to not be in range when the weapon fires. Which means changing everything about fleet deployment, said the Zafani representative, its luminous tendrils pulsing with agitated colors. Ships can no longer hold fixed positions. Stations become death traps. Fortress worlds are indefensible. Our entire strategic doctrine is obsolete. The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives began shouting across the floor, some in their native languages that the translators struggled to process. The three great empires, who had maintained careful diplomatic distance for centuries, now openly argued about blame and responsibility. This is humanity's fault, a Viridian subcommander declared. They brought chaos to our ordered galaxy. They brought innovation, countered a Korth scientist. We have been stagnant for millennia, refining the same technologies without questioning fundamental assumptions. They brought a weapon that makes war unwinnable, the Zafani military advisor stated coldly. How do you conduct warfare when a single shot can destroy a dreadnought that costs 50 years of planetary production to build? The economic calculations alone make conventional fleet engagement impossible. Claire stood and raised her hand for silence. It took several minutes for the chamber to quiet down enough for her voice to carry. Honored council members, this chaos proves my point exactly. The railgun has not just changed military technology. It has disrupted the political order that rested on that technology. You're all afraid. You should be. But your fear is driving you toward exactly the wrong response. And what response would you suggest? General Thrace demanded, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Should we simply accept human dominance? Should we dismantle our fleets and beg for your protection? No, Claire said firmly. You should accept that the galaxy has changed and decide together how to manage that change. The alternative is an arms race that will devastate everyone. But her words fell on deaf ears. Over the following week, intelligence reports reached the human delegation that confirmed their worst fears. The Viridian Dominion had begun a crash program to develop railgun technology, throwing resources at the project with desperate intensity. The Korth Collective quietly approached human scientists with offers of wealth and status in exchange for technical specifications. The Zafani Union started dismantling civilian infrastructure to build weapons research facilities. Lillian reviewed the intelligence data with growing concern. They are trying to reverse engineer the technology from the partial data they gathered during our demonstration. The Viridians are focusing on electromagnetic acceleration. The Korth are experimenting with mass drivers. The Zafani are taking a different approach entirely, trying to develop kinetic shields. Will any of them succeed? Claire asked. Eventually, yes, Lillian admitted. The principles are not secret. Humanity used railguns in primitive forms centuries ago. With sufficient resources and focus, any advanced civilization can develop them. The question is how long it takes and what happens during that time. Keith studied a tactical display showing fleet movements across Council space. Look at this. The Viridian Navy is repositioning dreadnoughts away from fixed patrol routes. The Korth are recalling ships from border regions. The Zafani are consolidating their forces around their home systems. Everyone is pulling back, concentrating strength, preparing for conflict. They are terrified of each other now, Claire observed. Before the railgun demonstration, fleet strength was relatively balanced. Energy weapons and shields had reached a plateau where no one had overwhelming advantage. Now that balance is broken. Whichever empire develops railguns first will have the ability to destroy the others. So they all rush to develop the technology, and in their rush they grow more suspicious and defensive. A priority message arrived at Claire's tablet. She read it quickly and her expression darkened. General Thrace has just transmitted a formal message to the Council. The Viridian Dominion is withdrawing from the Sanctuary Accords. They claim the treaty provisions no longer reflect the military reality of the galaxy. The Sanctuary Accords have maintained peace for 800 years, Lillian said quietly. If the Viridians withdraw, the other empires will follow within days. Keith turned away from the tactical display. Then we are watching the beginning of the collapse. The three great empires maintained stability through mutual deterrence based on balanced military power. We destroyed that balance in 4 minutes with a single railgun shot. Now they are all scrambling to regain advantage, and in their scrambling, they will tear apart the peace they spent centuries building. Claire stood at the window of the conference room, looking out at the stars of Sanctuary Prime's sky. Somewhere out there, fleets were moving, scientists were working in desperate haste, and military planners were calculating the odds of survival in a galaxy where the rules of warfare had fundamentally changed. "We need to act," she said finally. "If we wait for the empires to develop railguns independently, we will have a three-way arms race with no winners. But if we offer a different path, something that benefits everyone, we might prevent the disaster we have created." "What kind of path?" Keith asked. Claire turned back to face them, her expression resolute. "We offer them the technology freely. All of it. Complete specifications, manufacturing processes, training protocols. We give it to everyone at the same time, under one condition. They accept a new treaty, a unified defense pact that makes Council space collectively secure rather than fractured among competing empires." Lillian shook her head doubtfully. "The empires will never agree to that. It would mean surrendering their independence." "They will agree," Claire said, "because the alternative is mutual destruction. We just need to make them understand that before it is too late." But even as she spoke, another message arrived. This one was not a request or a demand. It was an intelligence report. Viridian commando units had been detected near Terra Station, moving with stealth technology through the shipping lanes. Keith read the report and looked up grimly. "They are not waiting for negotiations. They are coming to take the technology by force." Security alarms screamed through Terra Station's corridors as red emergency lights bathed everything in crimson. Lieutenant Roy Mitchell sprinted toward the research sector, his sidearm drawn and his heart pounding. Behind him, 6 more human security officers followed in tight formation, their boots echoing on the metal deck plates. "All units, we have unauthorized access in Research Bay 7, the station's computer announced. Multiple hostiles detected. Security protocols engaged." Roy reached the sealed blast door leading to the Railgun research labs. Through the reinforced window he could see movement inside. Dark shapes flickered across his field of vision, moving with inhuman speed and precision. Viridian commandos. They had somehow bypassed 3 layers of security to reach the most sensitive area of the entire station. "Breach in 30 seconds, his second-in-command, Sergeant Fiona Blake, said as she attached explosive charges to the door's locking mechanism. "Ready weapons." Inside the research bay, Dr. Lillian Foster worked frantically at her computer terminal. Her hands flew across the holographic controls as she initiated emergency data purge protocols. Around her, 5 Viridian commandos moved through the laboratory, their 4 arms working with terrifying efficiency as they downloaded files and captured physical components. The lead commando, identified by silver markings on his armor, pointed one weapon at Lillian while his other 3 hands continued working. "Do not resist, human. We have no desire to harm you. We simply require your railgun specifications." "You will not get them," Lillian said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. She entered the final command sequence. "I just purged the entire database. Everything is encrypted with quantum codes that will take your best computers 1,000 years to crack." The commando's purple-tinged face darkened with anger. "Foolish. We have already transmitted partial data to our fleet. Your resistance changes nothing." The blast door exploded inward with a thunderous boom. Roy and his team rushed through the smoke, weapons raised. The Viridian commandos reacted instantly, their superior reflexes allowing them to return fire before the humans had fully entered the room. Energy bolts scorched the air, and Roy felt the heat as a plasma shot missed his head by centimeters. "Take cover," Fiona shouted, diving behind a workstation. The firefight lasted less than 2 minutes, but in that time the research bay transformed into a war zone. Human kinetic weapons barked with sharp cracks while Viridian plasma rifles hissed and sparked. The commandos were faster, stronger, and better armed. But they were also outnumbered, and the humans had the advantage of defending familiar territory. Roy fired 3 quick shots at a commando attempting to flank their position. 2 missed, but the third caught the alien in the shoulder joint where armor plates connected. The commando went down with a pained cry. Another tried to leap over a laboratory counter, only to be caught mid-air by concentrated fire from Fiona and 2 other officers. Within minutes, all 5 commandos were subdued, their weapons scattered across the floor. The silver-marked leader lay bleeding from multiple wounds, his armor cracked and sparking. Roy approached carefully, keeping his weapon trained on the alien. "You are under arrest for espionage and attempted theft of classified military technology," Roy said formally. The commando laughed, a bitter sound that his translator turned mechanical. "It does not matter. We transmitted enough data. Our scientists will complete what we started. The Viridian Dominion will have railguns within months." Admiral Keith Warren arrived at the research bay 20 minutes later, accompanied by Ambassador Claire Dixon. They surveyed the damage and the captured commandos with grim expressions. Lillian sat at her terminal, still trembling slightly from the adrenaline, running diagnostics to determine exactly what information had been compromised. "They got approximately 30% of the railgun specifications before I shut them down," Lillian reported. "Enough to understand the basic principles and some of the engineering challenges. Not enough to build a functional weapon without significant additional research." Keith nodded slowly. "How long before they can fill in the gaps? With their resources? 6 to 8 months, maybe less if they are willing to take shortcuts and risk catastrophic failures during testing." Claire pulled up a secure communication channel on her tablet. "We need to move quickly. This attack changes everything. If the Viridians are willing to commit military espionage against Council members, then the situation is even more desperate than we thought." She sent an emergency summons to the Galactic Council for an immediate session. Within hours, representatives gathered once again in the Grand Chamber on Sanctuary Prime. But this time the atmosphere was not just tense. It was openly hostile. General Thrace stood at the Viridian platform, his forearms crossed in a posture of defiance. "The Dominion formally protests the detention of our personnel aboard Terra Station. They were conducting legitimate security inspections. They were armed commandos who bypassed security systems and attempted to steal classified technology," Keith responded flatly. "We have them in custody with full evidence of their espionage activities. Do not insult this council with obvious lies." Thrace's skin flushed darker purple. "You cannot prove they were acting under official orders." "We do not need to," Claire said, standing to address the full council. "The fact is that Viridian military operatives attempted to steal railgun technology by force. This action demonstrates exactly what I warned about. The arms race has begun, and it is already driving empires to desperate actions that threaten Council stability." She activated the central holographic projector. Images of the captured commandos appeared, along with data logs showing their transmission of partial railgun specifications. "The Viridian Dominion now possesses approximately 30% of our railgun technology. The Korth Collective and Zafani Union will no doubt demand equal access to maintain balance. We could spend months negotiating individual deals with each empire, watching them develop weapons independently, racing toward mutual destruction." Claire paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the chamber. "Or we can choose a different path. Humanity offers complete railgun technology to all council members simultaneously. Full specifications, manufacturing processes, training protocols, everything. No empire will have advantage over another. The technology will be shared equally." A murmur of surprise rippled through the assembled representatives. This was not what anyone had expected. The Korth scientist-researcher Ven leaned forward in its crystalline seat. "What are the conditions for this offer?" "One condition," Claire stated clearly. "All council members must sign a permanent peace treaty. Not a temporary accord or a conditional alliance. A binding agreement that establishes unified defense of council space and prohibits military action between member species. We share the technology that could destroy you all, but only if you agree never to use it against each other." The chamber exploded into debate. Some representatives immediately voiced support. Others protested that such a treaty would limit their sovereignty. Still others demanded time to consult their governments. But through it all, General Thrace remained silent, his expression growing darker with each passing moment. Finally he stood. "The Viridian Dominion rejects this proposal. We will not surrender our military independence to satisfy human demands. We have already obtained sufficient data to develop railguns independently. Within months, we will possess this technology without submitting to your treaty." Keith stepped forward. "General, you obtained 30% of the specifications. You are missing critical components including the magnetic field harmonics, the projectile guidance systems and the thermal management protocols. Without those, your railgun will either fail to achieve proper velocity or destroy itself during firing. You will waste months and vast resources chasing a technology you cannot complete." "We will see," Thrace replied coldly. The Viridian Dominion built an empire over 8,000 years through strength and determination. We do not need human charity, and we certainly do not need human treaties telling us how to conduct our affairs. He gestured to the Viridian delegation. This council is adjourned as far as the Dominion is concerned. We are withdrawing from Sanctuary Prime. Any council vessel that enters Viridian space will be considered hostile. Claire tried one more time. General, please reconsider. This path leads to war. If you withdraw now, the other empires will see it as aggression. They will mobilize their own fleets. Within weeks, we will have open conflict. Then we will be ready, Thrace said. He turned and walked from the chamber, his delegation following. The massive doors sealed behind them with a hollow boom that seemed to echo with finality. In the silence that followed, researcher Venn spoke quietly. The Korth Collective accepts humanity's proposal. We will sign the treaty. The Zafani representative pulsed with determined colors. As will the Zafani Union. We choose peace over pride. One by one, the other council members voiced their agreement. 46 species committed to the Unified Defense Treaty. Only one refused. But that one was the largest military power in the galaxy, and its refusal meant everything was about to change. Keith pulled up tactical displays on his personal tablet. Viridian fleet movements are already changing. They are pulling back from border regions and consolidating near their core systems. Defensive positioning, Fiona observed, having joined them after securing the captured commandos. They expect retaliation. No, Keith said grimly. They are preparing for offense. Look at the formation pattern. Those are not defensive deployments. They are staging for an attack run. Claire felt ice form in her stomach. They are coming here. They are coming for Terra Station. Within hours, the prediction proved accurate. Viridian long-range sensors detected a massive fleet mobilization. 47 dreadnoughts, accompanied by twice as many support vessels, began moving toward human-controlled space. At their head, aboard the flagship Dominion's Pride, General Thrace broadcast a message to the entire galaxy. The Viridian Dominion will not be dictated to by primitive species who stumbled upon a single effective weapon. We will take what we need to ensure our security, and we will demonstrate to this council that energy weapons still rule the stars. Any species that interferes will be considered an enemy of the Dominion. Admiral Keith Warren stood on the command deck of Terra Station, watching the approaching fleet on tactical displays. 47 dreadnoughts against a single orbital platform. By traditional calculations, it was not even a contest. The Viridian fleet should overwhelm them within minutes. But traditional calculations no longer applied. The galaxy was about to learn a lesson about the new reality of warfare, written in tungsten and relativistic physics. Ready the railgun, Keith ordered quietly. Let us show them exactly what their pride has earned them. Admiral Keith Warren stood at the command center of Terra Station, watching the tactical display as 47 red icons crept steadily closer through the darkness of space. The Viridian fleet maintained tight formation, their dreadnoughts arranged in a classic attack pattern that had won 1,000 battles across 8 millennia of warfare. Behind Keith, his crew worked in tense silence, hands steady on their controls despite the overwhelming odds they faced. Fleet distance, 12 million kilometers, reported Lieutenant Roy Mitchell from the sensor station. They will enter optimal energy weapon range in 18 minutes. Our railgun effective range? Keith asked calmly. 22 million kilometers, sir, answered Weapons Officer Commander Patricia Hayes. We can fire anytime. Dr. Lillian Foster sat at her engineering console, monitoring the railgun's power systems. The massive weapon ran the entire 3-kilometer length of Terra Station, its electromagnetic coils humming with barely contained energy. She had spent 3 years perfecting this weapon, and now it would face its first real combat test against the largest fleet deployment in recent galactic history. Power systems at 100%, Lillian reported. Thermal management optimal. Targeting computer online. We are ready to fire on your command, Admiral. Keith studied the tactical display with the calm focus of someone who understood exactly what was about to happen. The Viridian fleet commanders saw a single orbital station facing their armada. They calculated victory based on conventional warfare principles. Overwhelming firepower, concentrated attack, numerical superiority. They were about to learn that all their calculations were built on assumptions that no longer held true. Open a channel to the Viridian flagship, Keith ordered. The view screen flickered to life, showing General Thrace on the bridge of the Dominion's Pride. The Viridian commander's forearms were crossed, his purple-tinged face set in an expression of grim determination. Admiral Warren, Thrace said formally, I am offering you one final opportunity to surrender Terra Station intact. Transfer all Railgun technology, and your personnel will be allowed to evacuate safely. Refuse and we will take what we need from the wreckage. General, you are making a terrible mistake, Keith replied. Turn your fleet around now. There is still time to avoid this. Thrace's expression hardened. I have 47 dreadnoughts, Admiral. You have one station. The mathematics are simple even for humans. Yes, Keith agreed quietly. The mathematics are very simple. Patricia, target the lead dreadnought. Fire when ready. The railgun did not roar. It did not flash with brilliant light. There was only the faintest vibration through Terra Station structure as electromagnetic coils pulsed in precise sequence. A tungsten projectile, 40 kilograms of dense metal shaped into an aerodynamic dart, accelerated down the 3-kilometer barrel. In less than 1 second, it reached 3% the speed of light. The projectile crossed 12 million kilometers in roughly 13 seconds. On the bridge of the Dominion's Pride, the weapons officer noticed an anomaly on his sensors. General, I am detecting a small mass signature approaching at extreme velocity. Impact in 9 seconds. Thrace frowned. Activate defensive systems. Prepare evasive maneuvers. General, the velocity is beyond our response threshold. We cannot. The projectile struck the dreadnought's bow section, precisely where Lillian's targeting computer had calculated the ship's power core would be located. At relativistic speeds, the tungsten rod did not simply penetrate the hull. It vaporized everything it touched, creating a corridor of superheated plasma that expanded faster than the ship's internal bulkheads could react. The kinetic energy transfer propagated through the vessel's structure like a shockwave, snapping support beams and rupturing containment fields. The Dominion's Pride broke apart in complete silence, its massive hull splitting into 3 large sections that tumbled away from each other, trailing debris and atmosphere. Secondary explosions bloomed across the wreckage as power systems failed and ammunition stores detonated. 2,000 Viridian crew members died before they even understood what had killed them. Second target acquired, Patricia reported, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they had just done. Firing. Keith had given her a pre-calculated target list based on fleet positioning and command hierarchy. Every 30 seconds, another railgun projectile left Terra Station, each one traveling at 9,000 kilometers per second toward a predetermined target. The Viridian fleet sensors registered the impacts, but by the time the data reached their computer systems, the targeted ships were already dying. The third dreadnought took a hit in its engineering section. The projectile punched through the fusion reactors, and the resulting explosion consumed half the ship in an instant. The fourth dreadnought attempted an emergency turn to present a smaller profile, but the railgun round caught it amidships anyway, the kinetic impact shearing the vessel completely in half. The 5th, 6th, and 7th dreadnoughts died in quick succession, each one struck with surgical precision before they could even begin to react. They are breaking formation, Roy reported from sensors. The fleet is scattering. On the remaining Viridian bridges, panic had replaced military discipline. Ship commanders screamed contradictory orders. Navigators plotted impossible evasion courses. Weapons officers fired blindly at a target too far away for their energy weapons to reach. None of it mattered. The railgun rounds continued to arrive with mechanical precision, each one ending a ship that had taken 50 years and the resources of entire planets to construct. The 8th dreadnought exploded when a tungsten projectile struck its primary plasma conduits. The 9th died when the kinetic impact triggered a chain reaction in its missile magazines. The 10th took a hit directly through its command bridge, decapitating the ship's leadership in an instant. The 11th and 12th dreadnoughts were destroyed as they attempted to flee, the railgun rounds catching them from behind and passing through their engines with devastating effect. 4 minutes had elapsed since the first shot. Cease fire, Keith ordered. Patricia looked up from her console, surprised. Sir, we have multiple targets still in range. We can eliminate at least 20 more before they escape. I said cease fire, Keith repeated firmly. We have made our point. On the view screen, General Thrace's image returned. But this time he was not on the bridge of the Dominion's Pride. He was aboard one of the surviving command ships, his face ashen and his forearms trembling visibly. Behind him, the bridge was in chaos as officers shouted reports and damage assessments. Admiral Warren, Thrace said, his voice barely above a whisper. I request immediate cessation of hostilities. You mean you surrender, Keith stated flatly. Thrace closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something fundamental had changed in his expression. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the horrified understanding of someone who had just watched 12 dreadnoughts destroyed in the time it took to drink a cup of coffee. Yes, Thrace said. The Viridian Dominion surrenders. I am ordering my fleet to withdraw immediately. Please, no more firing. Return to Viridian space, Keith instructed. Do not attempt any aggressive actions against Council members. Humanity will contact your government within 24 hours to discuss the terms of your surrender and your acceptance of the Unified Defense Treaty. The Viridian fleet turned and fled, leaving behind clouds of debris and the bodies of over 20,000 crew members who had followed their general into a battle they could not win. Across the galaxy, every species with sensor arrays had watched the engagement in real time. The recordings would be analyzed for years to come, studied in military academies and debated in political forums. But the essential lesson was immediately clear to everyone. The era of energy weapon supremacy had ended. A new age had begun, written in tungsten and relativistic mathematics. Ambassador Claire Dixon stood before the Galactic Council 72 hours later. The chamber was packed with representatives, all of them subdued and thoughtful. Even the species that had initially resisted humanity's treaty proposal now listened with careful attention. The Viridian attack on Terra Station demonstrated exactly what I warned about, Claire said. When military doctrine becomes obsolete overnight, fear drives even rational leaders to desperate actions. General Thrace believed that numerical superiority and conventional tactics could overcome a technological advantage. He was wrong, and 20,000 Viridian crew members paid for that mistake with their lives. She activated the holographic display, showing the Unified Defense Treaty document. Humanity offers this treaty not from a position of conquest, but from a recognition that we have disrupted the galactic order. We take responsibility for that disruption by offering a path forward that benefits everyone. Complete technology sharing, mutual defense, and binding commitments to peaceful resolution of conflicts. Researcher Venn of the Korth Collective stood. The Korth Collective has already signed the treaty. We have received the complete Railgun specifications as promised. Humanity has honored their word. We call upon all remaining council members to do the same. One by one, the representatives came forward to sign. The Zephani Union. The Viridian Dominion, represented by a new military commander after General Thrace had been relieved of duty. 47 species in total, committing themselves to a unified future. 6 months later, Admiral Keith Warren walked through the command center of Guardian Platform 7, one of 12 new installations that now ringed Council space. Each platform mounted multiple railgun arrays, their 3-kilometer barrels pointing outward toward the unknown regions beyond Council territory. Human crews worked alongside alien personnel, training them in the operation and maintenance of weapons that had changed the galaxy forever. Dr. Lillian Foster joined him at the observation window, looking out at the stars. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "We ended 12,000 years of stable military balance. We forced an entire galaxy to change whether they wanted to or not." Keith considered the question carefully. No, the balance was not stable. It was stagnant. 3 empires held all the power while dozens of smaller species lived under their authority. We did not destroy that system out of malice. We did it because we approached an old problem with fresh thinking. And yes, there was pain in the transition. But look at what we built from that pain. He gestured to the tactical display showing the positions of all 12 Guardian platforms. Council space is more secure now than it has been in centuries. Every member species contributes to the defense network. No single empire holds military dominance. We created something better than what existed before. Lillian smiled slightly. And humanity went from being the newest, most dismissed council member to leading the entire defense initiative. All because we remembered that sometimes the simplest solution is the most effective one. Throwing rocks, Keith agreed with a quiet chuckle. We conquered the galaxy by throwing rocks really, really hard. A priority message arrived at Keith's command tablet. He read it quickly, then looked up with interest. There is a new species petitioning for council membership. They have achieved faster-than-light travel and established contact with our border patrols. What are they like? Lillian asked. According to the initial reports, they have some interesting ideas about gravitational manipulation technology. The evaluation committee wants our input on their application. The evaluation committee that you chair? Lillian noted with amusement. Keith nodded. Humanity has been entrusted with significant responsibility. We changed the galaxy, so now we bear the weight of guiding it forward. It is a burden I accept willingly. He turned back to the observation window, watching as a patrol of mixed-species ships passed by the platform, their formations perfect and their cooperation seamless. Out in the darkness beyond, the Guardian platforms stood silent watch, their railgun arrays ready but unused. Peace maintained not through fear, but through the shared understanding that some changes, however painful, lead to something better than what came before. The first human railgun had fired 6 months ago. Every alien empire had stopped in fear. But from that fear had come cooperation, from cooperation had come unity, and from unity had come a stronger, more secure galaxy than anyone had imagined possible. It was not the ending anyone expected. But it was the beginning of something extraordinary.